An Airbus 318 from Air France was on an ILS approach to Toulon Airport in France when the aircraft suddenly pitched up steeply. Why did this happen? And more important, what can be done to prevent it from happening again? Hi, my name is Magnar Nordahl. I am an airline captain and instructor. Before I start, I want to thank all of you who support me, either by sharing with your friends, subscribing, or by helping me with a small donation. Without you, this channel would have been nothing. So thank you so much. In this video, I will talk about something that can happen if you as a pilot lose your situational awareness. On the 20th December 2019, Air France Flight 7512 was on a scheduled flight from Paris-Orly to Toulon on the south coast of France. The aircraft was an Airbus 318, the smallest variant in the Airbus 320 family. The flight was routine until they started on the ILS approach to runway 05. But things didn't go as the crew had planned, and they ended up in a high energy situation. The aircraft was too high, the speed was high, and they had a strong tailwind. The crew lost situational awareness, and then things started to go wrong. As the crew tried to descend in time, the aircraft unexpectedly leveled off and captured a false glide slope. This caused the aircraft to pitch up steeply, and consequently, the speed decreased rapidly. This in turn triggered the alpha floor, which is a stall prevention system in all Airbus aircraft with fly-by-wire. The airplane automatically lowered the nose and increased engine power and climbed safely away. Before we take a closer look at this flight, I will tell you a little about the ILS and how it works, because it plays an important role in this incident. ILS stands for Instrument Landing System. It is the most used ground-based instrument approach system in use. The ILS has two installations on the ground, the localizer antenna and the glideslope antenna. The localizer antenna consists of 6 or more elements located at the end of the runway. The more elements you have, the more precise the localizer is. The localizer sends a directional signal along the runway centerline, allowing for the aircraft to align with the runway. In aircraft with glass cockpit, like the Airbus 318, the pilot will see a localizer deviation bar below the artificial horizon. There are 2 dots at each side of the center marker, and the full range represents a deviation of 2.5 degrees. The localizer is shown as a magenta diamond. If the diamond is to the left, it means that you are on the right-hand side of the localizer and must fly to the left to center it, and vice versa. It is a requirement that you stay inside 1 dot during the last part of the approach, which is below 1000 feet. The glide slope antenna is located abeam the touchdown area of the runway. It sends a horizontal signal with a defined slope. A normal glide slope is 3 degrees steep, but London City Airport has 5.5 degrees. The glide slope deviation bar is located to the right of the artificial horizon. There are 2 dots above and below the center marker, and the full range represents a deviation of 0.7 degrees. The glide slope is shown as a magenta diamond. If the diamond is above, then you are below the glide slope and must fly up to center it, and vice versa. And just as for the localizer, it is a requirement that you stay inside 1 dot during the last part of the approach. When you fly an ILS, you follow a corridor that becomes more and more narrow, and you must use smaller and smaller corrections to stay inside. Airliners have flight directors that give guidance signals to the pilots and the autopilot. The guidance signals are shown as a horizontal and vertical bar on the artificial horizon. To follow the flight director, you use the flight controls to put this little box, which symbolizes the aircraft, on the intersection between the 2 guidance bars. The principle is simple, as long as you know what the flight director is doing. And just one more thing. The glide slope antenna transmits more than one glide slope. In addition to the 3-degree slope, there are also slopes at 9, 12, 15 degrees and so on. Therefore, you should not approach the glide slope from above. But this is exactly what happened with Air France flight 7512. This is a video from the BEA, the Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety in France. Before we start, I will show you around the screen. Up here we have the vertical position of the aircraft. The video starts when they are 14.5 nautical miles from the runway at 6,000 feet. The airport elevation is 13 feet, so close to sea level. The ILS glide slope is shown here. The N1 indicator shows the rotational speed for the number 1 shaft driving the big fan in front of the engine and gives an indication of the thrust produced by the engine. The thrust levers are here. This is the speed brake lever. The speed brakes deploy on top of the wings and increase aerodynamic drag. They are now in fully open position. This is the landing gear lever and indicators. The gear is up. This is the flap lever and indicator. This is the navigation display and shows the position of the aircraft and the route they are following. They are about to intercept the inbound track to the airport. And in this corner we have the wind, 227 degrees and 55 knots. The true airspeed is 273 knots and the ground speed is 325 knots. Indicated airspeed is on the primary flight display and shows 250 knots. This is the artificial horizon showing pitch and roll attitude. The flight director bars are centered and the flight director modes are shown above. Autopilot number 2 in use, indicating that it's the first officer who is flying. To the right is the altimeter. They are now passing 6,000 feet. Selected altitude is 1,900 feet. And the vertical speed indicator shows 2,100 feet per minute in descent. Finally, this figure shows the position of the side stick of the pilot flying. I will now show the sequence in full, and afterwards I will break it down.
speed, speed, speed.
When the video starts, the aircraft is well above the glide path. They are 14.5 nautical miles from the runway at 6,000 feet. This gives a slope of 3.9 degrees. You can see the glide slope indicator is almost outside the scale. Autopilot number 2 is on. Both flight directors are on, giving guidance signals to the autopilot. The auto throttle is on. Now means navigation mode, and the aircraft is heading for Palme waypoint. Up des means open descent. In this mode, the auto throttle is commanded to set the engines to idle thrust, and the autopilot is maintaining 250 knots, which is the speed limit below 10,000 feet. The speed brakes are fully open. This gives a descent rate of about 2,000 feet per minute. In comparison, an ATR-72 can do more than 3,000 feet per minute because the propeller provides a lot of drag at that speed. But a jetliner is a sleek bullet, and at 250 knots, it's close to the speed for minimum drag. And this is a challenge for pilots converting from turboprop to jetliners. And don't forget the wind. 50 knots in your back is not what you want when you already are too high on the approach. The localizer is now alive, and we are more than 2 dots above the glide slope. The pilot sets the speed manually to 220 knots, and to allow for the speed to reduce, the flight director commands the aircraft to pitch the nose up. Getting closer to the localizer, the aircraft starts to turn towards the runway center line. Almost established on the inbound track, and the pilot activates the other autopilot. This arms the approach mode, which consists of localizer and glide slope. Green labels are active modes, and blue labels are armed modes. Lock star, localizer capture. While the speed decreases, the rate of descent is reduced to less than 1,000 feet per minute, and they are far above the glide slope. They are 10.5 nautical miles from the runway at 5,000 feet. The angle to the runway has increased to 4.5 degrees, but the pilots are not aware of it. Gear down. This will increase the drag, but will it be enough to get back to the glide slope? The tailwind is still 50 knots, so it's hard to say. Lock green, localizer hold. As the landing gear is coming down, the drag increases and the descent rate increases to 3,000 feet per minute or more. Flap 1 selected. The slat extends to the first position. Alt star, altitude capture. They are approaching 1900 feet and they are still not on the glide slope. Therefore, the aircraft starts to level off. The auto throttle changes to speed mode and will adjust the thrust to maintain the selected speed. Here is the question. Provided the aircraft did not level off, would it be possible to land from here? There are 2 dots above the glide slope. The speed is 220 knots. But because of the tailwind, the ground speed is 270 knots. That's 4.5 nautical miles per minute. They are descending through 2,600 feet with 2,800 feet per minute. The flaps is still not extended. What do you think? As the aircraft levels off and the engines spool up, you will feel the acceleration pushing you against the seat back. The pilot selects auto speed and the FMS commands 124 knots, which is the approach speed. Engine thrust is reduced to allow for the speed to bleed off. Alt hold. As the aircraft levels off, the crew selects flap 2. The slap moves to its second position, and then the flaps moves to 15 degrees. Flaps 3. The flaps moves to 20 degrees. Flaps 4. The slat moves to the third position and the flaps moves to 40 degrees. The pilot retracts the speed brakes. The localizer becomes unstable because the angle to the antenna becomes quite steep. And here comes the 9-degree glide slope. Glide slope star. The flight director catches the glide slope and up we go. Right here the pilot selects toga, takeoff, go around thrust. This is the highest setting on the engine. The auto throttle changes to manual toga mode. The vertical mode changes to SRS, Speed Reference System. The flight director will give a command to maintain the current speed, but not less than approach speed. Because of the high nose position, 30 degrees up, and the drag of the landing gear and flaps, the speed decreases rapidly and alpha floor is activated. Alpha floor is a stall prevention system that lowers the aircraft's nose to maintain optimum climb speed and commands toga. This alarm indicates that the autopilot is off. You can now see how the pilot is acting on the stick. Flaps 3. Here are more false glide slopes. Did you notice that they haven't set the altitude for missed approach? They should have leveled off at 2,400 feet. And the landing gear? Finally, here it comes up. This video clearly shows what can happen if you rush into an approach and lose situation awareness. And when things really start to go bad, you can easily get mentally overloaded. You get tunnel vision and you forget your procedures. The fly-by-wire system of the aircraft did a great job. It took control when needed and prevented the aircraft from stalling. And this baby Airbus has indeed very good climb performance. So, what can you do to prevent this? First of all, you must do a proper planning before you fly. If there are forecasted strong winds at low altitudes at your destination, you must be aware of that, because this can affect your approach. Secondly, you must plan your descent. We plan for a 3-degree descent gradient from the top, and that is very easy to calculate. Take your altitude above the airport in thousands of feet and multiply with 3. For example, if you cruise at 35,000 feet, your top of descent will be 105 track miles before the runway. Track distance is not the direct distance to the airport, but the distance you will fly during your arrival and approach. When flying a jetliner, you need 5 nautical miles to level off at 10,000 feet and reduce the speed to 250 knots, which is the speed limit, plus another 5 nautical miles to reduce the speed before approach. Therefore, your top of descent will be 115 track miles before touchdown. Then, add a factor for the wind. In this case, it was around 50 knots tailwind. So I will add another 5 miles, giving a total of 120 track miles. When flying a turboprop, we use the same rule of thumb, but we don't need the extra distance to slow down. Turboprops are lighter than jets, which means they are less energy sensitive, and they can reduce the speed easier when you reduce power. Propellers are great brakes. It's all about energy management. Altitude is energy, speed is energy, and fuel is energy. The worst scenario is to arrive high and fast. Your first action is to reduce the power to idle. If this is not enough, you will not be able to slow down in time and configure the aircraft for landing. So, you have to get rid of that extra energy. And here are some ways to do it. 1. Increase your track distance. Ask the approach controller to do an orbit at 360, or ask for radar vectors to give you extra 5 or 10 miles or whatever you need. 2. Increase your drag by increasing your speed. This method works best when you are some distance away from the airport. You set idle power and increase your rate of descent. And keep the speed up. A jet doesn't produce much drag at 250 knots, so you should ask ATC to increase your speed to, say, 280. Jetliners have spoilers, and turboprops have propellers that create plentiful of drag at idle power at high speed. The trick is to descend below your profile and then level off in order to bleed off the speed back to normal. 3. Increase your drag by getting dirty. That means you level off, set idle power, let the speed bleed off to landing gear extension speed and get it down. Then, descend with a speed close to maximum speed for landing gear extended. While doing this, you might initially end up above the glide slope. I will come back to this scenario very soon. Finally, turboprops have a joker up the sleeve. 100% propeller speed. This increases the drag. Regardless of your procedure, you must be stabilized at the stabilization height. If you understand that this is not possible, your only safe option is to go around. When you are cleared to fly an ILS approach, ATC will normally direct you in such a way that you will intercept the localizer first, and then the glide slope. However, the ultimate responsibility lies on the commander. If you for any reason understand that you will end up above the glide slope when you catch the localizer, which I define as being more than 1 dot above the glide slope, you must only arm the localizer when you are cleared for the ILS approach. When you are established on the localizer and you are descending towards the glide slope, and you are not more than 1 dot above the glide slope, and you have confirmed that this is the correct glide slope by cross-checking your altitude and distance to the runway, then and only then can you arm the glide slope. If you are more than full-scale deflection above the glide slope, you don't know how high you are above it, so go around. If you cannot be stabilized at your stabilization height, go around. Okay? That's all I have for this time. Please support my channel by sharing with your friends on all that. Thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and happy landing!